9 days before our wedding, my fiancée demanded I sign my house over to her parents. When I refused, she called it just paperwork, so I called off the entire wedding.
The document arrived in a crisp white envelope embossed with my fiancé's father's law firm logo. No casual email, no conversation first, just a formal, legally binding quitclaim deed presented to me over dessert at her parents' country club, as if it were the natural next course after the tiramisu. My name is Nathan. I'm 34, a civil engineer, and until that evening, I was 9 days away from marrying the woman I believed I'd spend the rest of my life with. Victoria, Tori to her friends, was 32, a corporate events planner with a talent for orchestrating beautiful, seamless experiences. She was polished, ambitious, and from a family whose version of struggle was when their yacht needed unexpected engine repairs. I was not from that world. My house, the one I was now being asked to sign over, was not inherited or gifted. It was earned, beam by beam, mortgage payment by crippling mortgage payment. I bought it 5 years ago, a dilapidated Victorian in a transitional neighborhood that everyone told me was a mistake. The roof leaked, the wiring was knob and tube, the foundation had settled so badly that marbles placed on the living room floor would roll into the kitchen. I spent 3 years living in a construction site, learning plumbing from YouTube tutorials and electrical work from a retired contractor I paid in homemade chili and gratitude. That house wasn't just an asset. It was my father's hands helping me frame the new kitchen wall before the cancer took him. It was my mother's tears when I showed her the finished master suite. It was my blood, sweat, and a decade of carefully hoarded overtime pay. It was the first thing in my life that was entirely, indisputably mine. Tori's family, the Vanderbilts of our small city, not the actual Vanderbilts, but they certainly acted like it, had always regarded my house with a kind of bemused condescension. "It's so charming," her mother, Patricia, would say, the pause before charming doing heavy lifting. "So much character." What she meant was small, old, and beneath us. I tolerated it because I loved Tori, and when I was with her, away from her family's gilded judgment, she was the woman I fell for. Warm, funny, capable of genuine wonder at things like the perfect patina of my restored tin ceilings. I convinced myself her parents' snobbery was a separate entity, a weather system she'd learned to navigate but not endorse. I proposed on the newly refinished wraparound porch at sunset with the string lights I'd installed specifically for that moment. She said yes, tears streaming. Her parents, when we told them, smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. "Well," Richard said, shaking my hand with a grip that felt like an assessment, "you've certainly proven yourself industrious." The wedding planning was a battlefield. Tori wanted a modest ceremony at the Botanical Garden. Her mother wanted a black tie affair at the country club with 300 guests, a 12-piece orchestra, and a florist flown in from Amsterdam. The compromise was a 150-guest wedding at the country club with a 6-piece band. I paid for half, draining a significant portion of my savings. It was worth it, I told myself. For her. The first tremor came 3 months before the wedding. Richard and Patricia requested a private lunch with me without Tori. This should have been my first red flag. At the club, over overpriced salmon, Richard leaned back in his leather chair. "Nathan," he began, his tone indicating a business transaction, "we've been thinking about your future with our daughter, about your assets and how they integrate with the family estate." My future, their daughter, the family estate. I felt like a job applicant being reviewed for a merger. "Specifically," Patricia added, stirring her tea with delicate precision, "your house. It's a lovely little property, but it's not really suitable for the life Tori is accustomed to, for the grandchildren when they arrive." I stared at them. "I'm not following."
Richard placed his napkin beside his plate. "We'd like to purchase the house from you, at fair market value, of course. It would give you capital to contribute to a more appropriate property, perhaps in the same neighborhood as our family home. A fresh start." together. Purchase, not gift. They were offering me money for the house I'd bled over, to buy a bigger, better, more suitable house, presumably under their watchful purview. I need to think about this, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, and I need to discuss it with Tori. Richard's smile was thin. Of course, but we felt it was best to approach you first, man to man. No need to burden Victoria with these logistical details. Burden, as if involving their own daughter in a major financial decision about her future home was an inconvenience. I didn't tell Tori immediately. I was ashamed, confused, trying to process the audacity. When I finally broached it, carefully, she waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that? They mentioned it to me ages ago. It's not a big deal, Nate. They're just trying to help us get started." Help us? They want to buy my house, Tori. The house I built with my own hands. I know, and it's amazing what you did with it. But it's so small, and the schools in that district aren't great, and you have to admit the neighborhood is still a little sketchy. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She wasn't being malicious. She genuinely didn't understand. To her, a house was a financial instrument, a stepping stone, a status symbol. The concept of a home as an extension of self, as memorial and monument and muscle and memory, was alien to her. "We're not selling my house," I said, my voice quiet but final. She sighed, the sound of a woman who believed she was merely humoring my sentimentality. "Okay, we'll revisit it later. No rush." We didn't revisit it. The wedding planning intensified. The house faded into the background, an unresolved file in the cabinet of our relationship. I told myself it was settled. I told myself she understood. I was wrong. The quitclaim deed arrived 9 days before the wedding. Not an offer to purchase, not a discussion, a demand for transfer of ownership. No money exchanged, no consideration, just my signature, notarized, gifting my home, to Richard and Patricia. And beneath the deed, a handwritten note from Tori on her monogrammed stationery. "Nate, my parents explained it to me, and I totally get it now. This is the cleanest way to handle the pre-wedding asset transfer for tax purposes. It's not like you're losing the house. We're still living there. It's just technically in their name now. It's just paperwork. Please sign it tonight so Daddy can file it before the wedding. Love you. XOXO. Tori." It's just paperwork. I read that sentence 5 times, each repetition a layer of my reality peeled away. She hadn't consulted me. She hadn't questioned her parents' audacity. She had accepted as gospel that my home, our home, as she called it, should be signed over to her parents as some sort of preemptive tax shelter. It's just paperwork. I sat alone in my living room, the deed on my coffee table, the string lights on the porch glowing softly in the evening. I had installed those lights for our engagement. Now they illuminated the death certificate of my future with her. The hook was set. The question was no longer whether I would sign. The question was what I would do instead. And the answer, forming slowly in the cold, clear space where my heart used to be, was absolute. Richard placed his napkin beside his plate. "We'd like to purchase the house from you, at fair market value, of course. It would give you capital to contribute to a more appropriate property, perhaps in the same neighborhood as our family home. A fresh start, together." Purchase, not gift. They were offering me money for the house I'd bled over, to buy a bigger, better, more suitable house, presumably under their watchful purview. I need to think about this, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, and I need to discuss it with Tori. Richard's smile was thin. "Of course, but we felt it was best to approach you first, man to man. No need to burden Victoria with these logistical details." Burden. as if involving their own daughter in a major financial decision about her future home was an inconvenience. I didn't tell Tori immediately. I was ashamed, confused, trying to process the audacity. When I finally broached it, carefully, she waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that? They mentioned it to me ages ago. It's not a big deal, Nate. They're just trying to help us get started." "Help us? They want to buy my house, Tori. The house I built with my own hands. I know, and it's amazing what you did with it. But it's so small, and the schools in that district aren't great, and you have to admit the neighborhood is still a little sketchy." I looked at her. Really looked at her. She wasn't being malicious. She genuinely didn't understand. To her, a house was a financial instrument, a stepping stone, a status symbol. The concept of a home as an extension of self, as memorial and monument and muscle and memory, was alien to her. "We're not selling my house," I said, my voice quiet but final. She sighed, the sound of a woman who believed she was merely humoring my sentimentality. "Okay, we'll revisit it later. No rush." We didn't revisit it. The wedding planning intensified. The house faded into the background, an unresolved file in the cabinet of our relationship. I told myself it was settled. I told myself she understood. I was wrong. The quitclaim deed arrived 9 days before the wedding. Not an offer to purchase, not a discussion, a demand for transfer of ownership. No money exchanged, no consideration, just my signature, notarized, gifting my home, to Richard and Patricia. And beneath the deed, a handwritten note from Tori on her monogrammed stationery. "Nate, my parents explained it to me, and I totally get it now. This is the cleanest way to handle the pre-wedding asset transfer for tax purposes. It's not like you're losing the house. We're still living there. It's just technically in their name now. It's just paperwork. Please sign it tonight so Daddy can file it before the wedding. Love you. XOXO. Tori." It's just paperwork. I read that sentence 5 times, each repetition a layer of my reality peeled away. She hadn't consulted me. She hadn't questioned her parents' audacity. She had accepted as gospel that my home, our home, as she called it, should be signed over to her parents as some sort of preemptive tax shelter. It's just paperwork. I sat alone in my living room, the deed on my coffee table, the string lights on the porch glowing softly in the evening. I had installed those lights for our engagement. Now they illuminated the death certificate of my future with her. The hook was set. The question was no longer whether I would sign. The question was what I would do instead. And the answer, forming slowly in the cold, clear space where my heart used to be, was absolute.
I didn't sign. I didn't call. I didn't scream or cry or throw things. I sat in my house, and I thought like an engineer. I assessed the structural integrity of what we had built together, and I found the foundation irreparably compromised. The quitclaim deed wasn't the first crack. It was the catastrophic load that revealed every hidden flaw. I began to catalog with surgical precision the failures I had previously explained away. Failure point 1: respect. Her parents had never respected me, and she had never defended me. The condescension about my career, my education, my family, I had absorbed it all, believing I could earn their approval through sheer persistence. But approval earned is not respect freely given. And Tori, rather than standing beside me, had simply learned to change the subject. Failure point 2: partnership. We had never discussed finances with any real transparency. Our joint account was for wedding expenses only. She had her money, I had mine, and the unspoken assumption was that her family's wealth was a safety net, while my assets were simply mine. Now I understood. My assets were meant to become theirs.
Failure point 3. Values. I had believed our different upbringings were complementary, her polish to my grit, her connections to my craftsmanship. But this wasn't difference, it was incompatibility. She viewed my house as a transactional object. I viewed it as sacred. There was no bridge between these worldviews. There was only one of us capitulating to the other. And finally, failure point 4. Communication. She hadn't talked to me. She had received a directive from her parents and passed it along like a memo. Please sign this. Love you. There was no space in that exchange for my feelings, my perspective, my autonomy. I was a signature stamp on the dotted line of their family planning. The conflict escalated in my own mind, a spiral of recontextualized memories. Every time Richard had called my house cute, every time Patricia had asked when I was going to get a real job, engineering apparently was a hobby, every time Tori had laughed nervously and changed the subject, instead of saying, his work is incredible and his home is beautiful and you will respect him. By midnight, I had moved beyond hurt into a cold, crystalline clarity. I was not angry. Anger is hot, reactive, temporary. This was something else, the absolute certainty of a decision made. I did not sleep. I drafted an email, not to Tori, not yet, first to my wedding planner. Effective immediately, cancel all wedding arrangements. I will cover all cancellation fees. Do not contact Victoria Reed regarding this cancellation until 8 a.m. tomorrow. You will receive confirmation from me at that time. Thank you for your professionalism.
Then I drafted a second email, this one to my lawyer, a pragmatic woman named Janice who had helped me with the house purchase years ago. I need you on standby. A situation has arisen that may require legal action regarding property rights and potential fraud. Details forthcoming. Please bill me for your retainer. At 6 a.m., I showered, dressed in my usual jeans and work shirt, and made coffee in my kitchen. The kitchen my father had helped me frame, his ghost still warm in the reclaimed wood cabinets. I drank it slowly, deliberately. At 7:58 a.m., I sent the confirmation email to my wedding planner. At 8 a.m. precisely, I called Tori. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright. "Nate, did you sign it? Daddy needs it by noon." "No," I said. "I didn't sign it, and I'm not going to." A pause. "Okay, we can talk about it tonight. I know it's a lot to process, but my parents really do have our best interests at heart." "The wedding is off, Tori." Another pause, longer, then a laugh, nervous and brittle. "What? Don't be dramatic. We're 9 days out. Everything's finalized." "I finalized the cancellation an hour ago. All vendors have been notified, the venue, the caterer, the band, the florist. It's done." The shift in her voice was immediate, from dismissive to panicked. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't. Nate, this is insane. Over paperwork? Over paperwork?" "It was never about the paperwork," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It was about the fact that you asked me to sign away my home without a conversation. It was about the fact that your parents think they own me and you never corrected them. It was about the fact that I have spent 4 years trying to be worthy of your family and you have spent 0 years trying to be worthy of mine." Silence. Then her voice cracking. "My parents are just trying to protect me, to protect us. They've always handled the finances. You don't understand how their world works." "No," I agreed. "I don't. And I don't want to. I don't want to live in a world where love is a merger and a home is a tax shelter. I want to live in my imperfect, valuable, mine house with someone who sees it as I do. That's not you." I heard her breath hitch, a sob building. "Nate, please, we can fix this. I'll talk to them. We'll figure something out. Don't throw us away." "I'm not throwing us away. You and your parents already did that. I'm just acknowledging the wreckage." I hung up. Then I turned off my phone, walked to my workshop in the basement, and spent the rest of the day restoring a vintage oak banister I'd salvaged from a demolished church. Sanding, staining, sealing. The rhythm of repair.
the quiet dignity of making something beautiful from something discarded. My phone remained off for 3 days. The silence was its own form of detonation. I learned later, through fragments and secondhand accounts, that the shockwaves radiated outward in concentric circles of chaos. Circle 1, Tori. My call didn't just end our engagement, it annihilated her reality. She had genuinely believed, with the unshakable faith of the perpetually insulated, that I would ultimately comply, that my love for her would override my attachment to a building, that her parents' plan was merely an unpleasant but necessary step toward our bright, prosperous future. My refusal, my cancellation, was not just a rejection, it was an earthquake that revealed the fault lines beneath her entire worldview. Her mother called me 17 times. Her father sent a formal, legalistic email accusing me of breach of promise and threatening to pursue recovery of wedding expenditures. I didn't respond to either. Circle 2, the families. My mother, when I finally called her, listened in silence as I explained what had happened. Then she said, "I never liked her," with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had bitten her tongue for 4 years. "But I was waiting for you to see it yourself." My father, 2 years gone, had seen it immediately. "She's lovely, son," he'd said after meeting Tori for the first time, "but her folks, they're gonna eat you alive if you let 'em." I hadn't listened. I'd thought he was being overprotective, old-fashioned. He was right. I was being devoured, and I hadn't even felt the teeth. Circle 3, the wedding industry. The cancellation of a 150-guest wedding 9 days out is not a quiet event. It is a cascade of frantic phone calls, contractual penalties, and bewildered vendors suddenly out thousands of dollars in expected revenue. I paid every cancellation fee without argument. It cost me nearly $14,000. I considered it tuition for the most expensive lesson of my life. Circle 4, our social circle. The narrative war began immediately. Tori's version, circulated through tearful phone calls and dramatic group texts, painted me as a man who had a mental breakdown over a minor financial request. She was the abandoned bride, the victim of my inexplicable cruelty. Her friends rallied around her with righteous indignation. My version was simpler. When people asked, and they did, cautiously, curiously, I said only, "She asked me to sign my house over to her parents." I said no. She insisted. I ended it. The contrast between her theatrical victimhood and my clinical brevity was, I later learned, persuasive. People are skeptical of drama. They are less skeptical of quiet facts. The climax, the true tectonic revelation, occurred 10 days after my call. I was in my workshop, finishing the banister installation, when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the front window, I saw Tori's white BMW. She got out alone. I considered not answering, but I owed myself, if not her, the closure of witnessing the end in person. I opened the door. She stood on my porch, beneath the string lights, looking smaller than I remembered. No designer dress today, just jeans, a plain sweater, her face bare of makeup. She looked, for the first time since I'd known her, like a real person rather than a presentation. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked into my living room. Our living room, she had called it, though she'd never contributed a single nail to its restoration. She looked at the newly installed banister, the refinished floors, the wall of photographs documenting my parents, my grandparents, my uncle who taught me how to use a circular saw. "You did all this yourself," she said. Not a question. "Yes." I never really understood what that meant. She turned to face me. "My parents have always just bought things, hired people. I thought that was normal. I thought your way was just the harder way. Not better, just harder." I waited. "I talked to my therapist," she continued, her voice fragile. "She asked me why I thought it was okay to ask you to sign away something you built with your own hands. And I didn't have an answer. I assumed you'd do it because you loved me, because you always gave in eventually." She was crying now, quiet tears tracking down her cheeks.
I treated your love like a negotiation, like if I just made the right arguments you'd concede. I never asked what it cost you. I never even saw that there was a cost." The revelation hung between us, heavy and irreparable. She finally understood, but understanding, I was learning, is not the same as redemption. It is not the same as repair. It is simply the moment the structural engineer identifies the fatal flaw, too late to save the building, but in time to prevent future collapses. "I am so sorry, Nate," she whispered. "I know it's too late. I know I broke us, but I needed you to know that I finally see it. What I did, what I let them do." I looked at this woman I had loved, this woman who had, in her own way, loved me, just not well enough, not deeply enough, not actually enough to overcome the gravitational pull of her family's values. "Thank you," I said, "for saying that." She looked up, a flicker of hope in her reddened eyes. "It doesn't change anything," I continued, gently. "The wedding is canceled, the relationship is over. I don't hate you, Tori, but I don't love you anymore either. That part of me, the part that believed we could bridge our worlds, died on this porch, reading your note about just paperwork." Her hope crumbled, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, accepting the judgment she had earned. "Can I ask you one thing?" she said. "Yes. If I had said no to them, if I had defended you, refused the deed, stood up to my parents, would we have had a chance?" I considered the question with the care it deserved. "Maybe," I said, "if you had done it years ago, if you had drawn a line and never let them cross it. But you didn't, and I can't build a future on what-ifs." She nodded again. Then she walked to the door, paused with her hand on the frame, my hand-carved frame, installed on a frozen January morning 2 years ago, and left without another word. I watched her BMW reverse down my driveway and disappear around the corner. The string lights flickered in the evening breeze. The revelation was complete. She had finally seen the truth, and I had finally accepted that seeing it wasn't enough.
The aftermath of a canceled wedding is not a single event. It is a long, slow winter of administrative consequences and emotional frost. The financial fallout. I had expected the financial hit. What I hadn't expected was the audacity of Richard's legal maneuvering. A week after Tori's visit, I received a letter from his firm, not on his personal letterhead, but on official law firm stationery, which I found both professionally unethical and deeply on brand. The letter demanded reimbursement for wedding expenses incurred in reliance on the promised union, including the country club deposit, non-refundable per their contract, the florist, the band, and, absurdly, Patricia's mother of the bride gown. I forwarded the letter to Janice without comment. Her response was a single email. "He's bluffing. Don't respond. I'll send a cease and desist if he persists." He didn't persist, but the attempted shakedown confirmed everything I needed to know about the family's character. This was not grief. It was an invoice. The house. The quitclaim deed was never mentioned again. I assume it was quietly filed in the circular bin of abandoned schemes. My house remained mine, unencumbered, uncompromised, and suddenly profoundly quiet. I had grown so accustomed to the noise of wedding planning, of Tori's presence, of her parents' constant assessment, that the silence was disorienting. I would walk through rooms I had rebuilt and feel not pride, but emptiness. What was the point of a beautiful home if there was no one to share it with? This, I learned, was the true cost of the cancellation. Not the money, not the social awkwardness, but the sudden, vast emptiness where a future used to be. The social fallout. Our mutual friends divided, as they always do. Tori's inner circle, the country club set, the legacy sorority sisters, rallied around her with the fervor of true believers. I was painted as a gold digger in reverse, a man who had pursued a wealthy woman for her connections, then balked when asked to contribute fairly to the partnership. The irony was so grotesque it was almost funny. My friends, the ones who had helped me demo drywall and install subflooring, who had eaten my chili and drunk my cheap beer, saw the situation differently. They didn't need a detailed explanation. They had seen the 4 years of subtle disrespect, the way Tori's parents regarded my calloused hands with barely concealed distaste. When I told them about the quitclaim deed, Leo simply said, "Took you long enough."
The family fallout. Tori's parents, predictably, went no contact. This was not a loss. Her younger brother, Andrew, reached out to me privately a month later. We had always gotten along. He was the black sheep of the family, a public defender who had rejected the family firm and the family values along with it. "She's a mess," he said, "but she's also, for the first time in her life, actually questioning things. Mom and Dad are losing their minds. They thought you'd fold. Everyone folds eventually. You didn't." "I didn't stand up for me," I said. 4 years, and she never once told them to back off. "I know," he said. "I'm not excusing her. I'm just saying you might have done her a favor. She can't hide behind them anymore. She has to actually become a person now." I didn't respond. Her personal growth was no longer my concern. The personal fallout. This was the deepest, most corrosive consequence. I had defined myself, in large part, by my capacity to build and maintain relationships. My house was proof of my competence. My engagement was proof of my worthiness. When the engagement collapsed, it didn't just take Tori with it, it took my confidence in my own judgment. How had I missed the signs? How had I spent 4 years with a woman who could, without apparent struggle, ask me to sign away my most sacred possession? Was I that desperate for love? That blind to red flags? That easily manipulated by polish and pedigree? I spent many nights in my workshop, not building, just sitting among the tools and lumber, trying to reconstruct the architecture of my own self-deception. The beginning of reconstruction. 3 months after the cancellation, I did something I hadn't done in years. I hosted a party. Not a wedding, not an engagement celebration, just a Saturday afternoon barbecue for my actual friends, the ones who had never cared about my house's square footage or my fiancée's pedigree. Leo brought his famous ribs. My cousin Elena brought her 3 rambunctious children who immediately began exploring the yard. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, came with her famous apple pie and stayed for 3 hours, holding court on the porch swing. At dusk, as the string lights flickered on automatically, I stood at the edge of my property and watched the people I loved fill the space I had built. The house was full of laughter, music, the smell of grilled meat, and the sound of children shrieking. It wasn't a wedding, it wasn't a merger. It was just a home, doing what homes are meant to do, sheltering the people who matter. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than loss. I felt foundation.
It's been 18 months since I called off the wedding. The house is still mine. The string lights still flicker on at dusk, and I am, slowly, learning to trust myself again. The final word on Tori. I haven't seen her since she left my porch. I hear things, through Andrew and the occasional mutual friend. She moved out of her parents' house, apparently the first independent housing decision of her life. She's in therapy, she's volunteering at a legal aid clinic, the same one where Andrew works. She's dating someone, a social worker, a man her parents reportedly don't understand. None of this changes what happened between us, but it suggests that my rejection was not just destruction, it was also, perhaps, liberation. She had been raised in a gilded cage, taught that love was transactional and worth was external. My refusal to participate in her family's transaction forced her to confront the emptiness of that worldview. I don't need her gratitude. I don't need her apology, which I've already received. I just need her to stay in the past tense, where she belongs. The house. The house is no longer a memorial to my labor. It is simply my home. I've stopped treating it like a sacred artifact and started living in it properly. I use the good dishes. I track sawdust across the refinished floors. I let my nephew draw on the wall in the workshop with chalk. A temporary mural we'll paint over together next weekend. A house is not a monument. It's a container for a life. And my life, I'm discovering, is richer than I gave it credit for. The question of forgiveness. People ask me if I've forgiven Tori. The question assumes that forgiveness is a binary state, a switch to be flipped. It's not. Forgiveness, for me, is an ongoing process of release. I release the anger, and it returns. I release the disappointment, and it echoes. I release the what-ifs, and they whisper back. But with each release, the grip loosens. The memory of her betrayal is no longer a raw wound. It's a scar, visible but no longer painful. I can talk about the quitclaim deed without my voice shaking. I can drive past the country club without flinching. This is not forgiveness exactly. It's something more practical, the acceptance of irreparable damage. Some things cannot be fixed. They can only be survived. The new architecture. I'm dating again. Cautiously, deliberately, a woman named Nora, a high school art teacher who wears paint-stained overalls and has never heard of the country club. Our first date was at a diner. We split a milkshake and argued about the merits of abstract expressionism. She has a small apartment she's been slowly personalizing with thrifted furniture and her own paintings. She understands, without explanation, why I won't ever sell my house. I haven't told her the full story. Not yet. But when I do, I suspect she won't be horrified or pitying. She'll just nod, seeing it as a piece of the architecture that made me who I am.
The verdict. So, AITA for calling off the wedding when my fiancée demanded I sign my house over to her parents? The objective answer is clear. No. A demand to sign away a significant hard-earned asset presented without discussion on the eve of a wedding is not a reasonable request. It is not a test of love. It is an attempted extraction. Refusing to comply with an extraction is not selfish. It is self-preservation. But the deeper question, the one that keeps me awake some nights, is not about the deed. It's about the 4 years that preceded it. Did I fail to communicate my values clearly enough? Did I enable her family's condescension by tolerating it? Did I love a real woman or the potential I projected onto her? The answer, I think, is yes to all of it. I was complicit in my own diminishment. I allowed her family to define the terms of our relationship, and I expected Tori to somehow transcend those terms without ever asking her to. I wanted her to choose me without ever forcing the choice. I wanted to be accepted without demanding acceptance. That's not love. That's wishful thinking. The resolution, then, is not that I was right and she was wrong. It's that we were both participants in a relationship with fundamentally incompatible foundations. She believed love was accommodation. I believed love was recognition. Neither of us was willing or able to adopt the other's framework. The wedding would have been a ceremony, not a solution. The marriage would have been a slow, corrosive negotiation, each concession chipping away at my selfhood until nothing remained but the shape of her family's expectations. I didn't lose a future. I escaped a demolition. So, no, I don't think I'm the asshole. I think I'm a man who finally recognized that the architecture of his life was being quietly condemned by people who had never laid a single brick, and I refused to sign the demolition order. The house still stands, the lights still glow, and I am still here inside it, building a life that belongs only to me. That's not cruelty. That's not selfishness.
That's just engineering, recognizing when a structure is unsound and having the courage to walk away before it collapses on everyone inside.
Which side of that story were you on? Let me know in the comments. And if you love diving into these Reddit rabbit holes with me, subscribe to Reddit Be Mine. We're building the best storytelling community on YouTube, and we'd love to have you. Click that sub button and stay tuned.